All right, today we're going to look at a sonnet by Edmund Spenser, his sonnet number 30. Before I read that, please consider subscribing if you're watching and you're not a subscriber. And again, to those who have subscribed, thank you very much. I'm trying a little experiment with the timing of this video. People who seem to know about these things say that posting a video in the middle of the week, say a Wednesday, is better than at other times for this reason and that reason and another reason. I don't know. Maybe that's true, and maybe I'll get some more views if I do this. So anyway, I'm gonna give that a whirl this week. So today the sonnet is number 30 by Edmund Spenser. Spenser was, of course, a great Elizabethan poet, contemporary of Shakespeare's. He died in 1599, which is a very long time ago. And he's best known for the epic poem, The Faerie Queen, which, in all candor, I've never read through entirely, just bits, I suppose, here and there over time. Of course, many other poems, and he's also known for the Spenserian sonnet, which I think, as I mentioned in one of these earlier little chats, is of the three main types of sonnets, the Shakespearean, the Petrarchan, and the Spenserian, is the one I like best. It has a rhyme scheme that I think is just very pleasing. So we're going to look at that. I'll talk about some of those formal aspects of it at the end. So we'll start as usual. I'll just read through it. My love is like to ice, and I to fire. How comes it then that this her cold so great is not dissolved through my so hot desire, but harder grows the more I her intreat? Or how comes it that my exceeding heat is not delayed by her heart frozen cold, but that I burn much more in boiling sweat and feel my flames augmented manifold? What more miraculous thing may be told that fire, which all thing melts, should harden ice, and ice, which is congealed with senceless cold, should kindle fire by wonderfull device? Such is the power of love in gentle mind, that it can alter all the course of kynd. Okay, very nice. And unlike many instances of modern poetry, there's no problem figuring out just basically what's being said, what the situation is. There's nothing disorienting about it. He's in anguish over his inability to woo the woman that he loves, and it seems, in fact, to be alienating her more the more that he demonstrates his love, the more that he pursues her. Not an unfamiliar situation necessarily, but there's a specific kind of way I want to look at this. So the great critic and scholar, great though somewhat controversial for reasons that are outside the scope of what I'm going to talk about today, but the great scholar Clanth Brooks, I think it's pronounced Clanth Brooks, had an essay that I was looking at recently, in which he's writing about the poetry of a number of Southern poets. There's a point where he's talking about the poetry of Robert Penn Warren, and he says at one point that that Warren's poetry is concerned, among other things, with the implications and mysteries and anguishes and so forth arising from the fact that human beings are part of nature, but at the same time seem to stand apart from it as a kind of counterforce or aberration, perhaps in some ways a defiant one, just in its midst. So in other words, that we're part of nature, but also that there's something else in our makeup that can't necessarily be ascribed to nature or assimilated into a coherent conception of it. or can't be at any rate in any way that we've yet found. And Brooks puts it this way: man is not merely natural. His capacity for defying nature is the typically human trait. Um, of course, it's not uncommon to hear people, usually when they're condemning the behavior or lifestyles that certain others engage in or the values that they espouse, to describe that behavior and those values as unnatural. Um, but it turns out that's not really very much of a basis for objection. It's an argument that must, well, it's not an argument really. Most of the time, it's just a prejudice. But we'll be generous here. It's an argument that must inevitably nip them in the heels because they themselves, of course, do things and espouse values that can't be described as natural. James Baldwin, he said it very nicely, as he usually did, in an essay on homosexuality and its relation to the natural that he published in the late 40s. And he puts it this way. Where is it? Okay. It develops when we think about it that not only is a natural state perversely indefinable outside of the womb or before the grave, but that it is not on the whole a state which is altogether desirable. It is just as well that we cook our food and are not baffled by water closets and do not copulate in the public thoroughfare. Well said. um, And then William Faulkner, in a novel I happen to just be reading at the moment, speaks of, quote unquote, man's ramshackle confederation against environment. And he mentions time and wilderness as the two elements of environment that he's thinking of there. So these are just really random encounters with this idea from um, some of my recent reading. But I think the randomness itself only goes to show how easy it is to come across this notion. So, indeed, the point about our peculiar relation to nature, that we seem to be in it and at least in some ways or aspirationally not in it at the same time, is obvious enough. But there are ways of looking at it, I think, ways of considering it that can be very powerful and productive for us. As can be the case with any aspect of our condition that's so fundamental that we take it for granted most of the time. Much of art and philosophy is concerned with those very things. It's not necessarily the case that a poem you read, a novel you read, a painting you see, anything is giving you some stunningly original idea. It's giving you an experience about some aspect of our nature that may be familiar to you, at least notionally, but that we kind of bury beneath daily activity in our daily lives and take for granted most of the time. Um, our awareness of our own mortality, that's one special quality we have among the planet's living beings, it seems. Maybe elephants are an exception. They behave in certain ways that suggest that they, at the end of their lives, they know they're gonna die. But that aside, it does seem to be a human trait. That can be an avenue to these kinds of reflections and that kind of powerful experience. And romantic love, another signature trait that we have, can be one also, as I think Spenser wants us to see and reflect upon. So Brooks's formulation, "we're not merely natural, defying nature is in some sense the quintessentially human trait," I think is a useful frame through which to look at this sonnet by Spenser. So the main tropes in this poem, fire and ice, are natural elements, of course. I'd say they're at once striking and affecting tropes for the often painful intensities that within us that mark us out as a special case within the natural world. And I think they're also harbingers of the futility of our efforts to conceptually encompass this phenomenon of love and by extension, the nature of our peculiar being. The speaker in the poem is grappling with this anguish that he has in finding that his love for this woman is not reciprocated, and he reaches for these tropes drawn from nature to try to come to terms with his situation, or really use them to characterize what is to him the nonsensical character of what is happening to him in his longing for this seemingly unattainable love object. He wants it to make sense, and he's appealing to nature as the standard of what should be. He seems to feel that his intense desire for this woman, by virtue of that very intensity, must betoken a connection between them that has to be deep enough and strong enough to be natural. I think it's true that some part of our emotional makeup wants to believe that this feeling that is engulfing me, if I am in love with someone, must be connecting with something real that isn't just a product of my subjective experience, but must transcend me and also encompass the person who inspires it. I think any reasonably well-adjusted person, of course, knows rationally that every individual person has a will and mind of his or her own, and that it doesn't really work that way. But that isn't necessarily how it feels, and it's not uncommon to, I think, for people to be caught up in that particular kind of intensity. But this appeal to nature as the criterion of what should be happening simply doesn't work for him, and he describes a dynamic that in nature would not make sense. Fire would not harden ice, and ice would not melt, or I'm sorry, ice would not quell or douse fire. I mean, you can see how he phrases it here. Um, how comes it then that this her cold so great is not dissolved through my so hot desire, but harder grows the more I her entreat? So not only does his heat fail to um, uh, her cold so great does not dissolve it, but it makes it even colder, even harder. It has the exact opposite effect. Um, it's a kind of nonsensical, kind of a crazy dynamic that he's describing that violates laws of nature, and um, which becomes the standard to which he appeals uh, to um, to suggest that his love should be reciprocated, that it's only in fact natural that it should be. How comes it that my exceeding heat is not delayed by her heart frozen cold, but that I burn much more in boiling sweat? Um, so his heat isn't dissipated. In fact, it's increased. It's augmented. Um, and then he describes it as a miraculous thing by which fire, which all thing melts, should harden ice, and ice, which is congealed with senseless cold, should kindle fire by wonderfull device. And then he concludes in the couplet, such is the power of love in gentle mind that it can alter all the course of kynd. So it's that sense of the gentle mind, this aspect of us that's not merely human. Brooks is part of us. It's not merely human. I'm sorry, not merely natural. Maybe expressed here by the gentle mind. Nature isn't necessarily a gentle place, and that gentleness of mind um, is seems to be the part of us that can transcend nature and find ourselves in terribly intense emotional anguish of this sort when things don't go as we care for, and it can alter the course of kynd. It can actually transcend or uh, kind of set at naught natural dynamics and processes. and so forth. So that's kind of, I think, what's going on in the poem, in terms of what he wants you to think about, what he wants you to, the connection he wants to make with you in this kind of emotional level. So I'll talk a little about the formal aspect of it. This is a sonnet, as I said, and so it's got all the earmarks of it. It's 14 lines. It's 10 syllables each line. Strictly speaking, it's iambic pentameter, which means there are 5 iambs, 5 units. They're called feet in poetry. Um, and an iamb is one that has an unstressed followed by a stressed syllable. And though strictly speaking, it may be the case that you should, if you were to recite it, say it strictly that way. I think typically now we wouldn't do that, and I think it's more interesting to use regular accentual patterns um, uh, when when um, when trying to appreciate a poem like this. But I think that the first line, "My love is like to ice and I to fire," does seem to me to break down into 5 iambs. My love is like to ice and I to fire. There's no strain. There's nothing artificial really sounding about that. Um, by pronouncing it that way. The second line I think is a little more complicated. How comes it then that this her cold so great? So I think you've got an I am at the beginning, how comes, but then I don't think you get another stress if you just say it in normal accents. I don't think you get that until this. So how comes it then that this her cold so great? And then it concludes with two, her cold so great. Um, but that's um, for you to decide. And you may find something. Usually, there's something to find that's interesting in the way that it doesn't, the way that it moves in natural speech and outside the kind of straitjacket of 5 strict iambs each line. And there are 3 quatrains and a concluding um, couplet. And what is unique about a Spenserian sonnet is that in fact, I'm going to show you this because the production values here are really amazing. This is the rhyme scheme of a Spenserian sonnet. So it goes, the first quatrain is A, B, A, B, then B, C, B, C, C, D, C, D, and then E, E. So unlike a Shakespearean or a Petrarchan sonnet, where you have a new set of rhymes with each quatrain that emerges. In the Spenserian, you have this overlap. So the in the first quatrain, of course, the first and third lines rhyme, the second and fourth lines rhyme. Then in the second quatrain, the rhyme of the first and third lines is the same rhyme as the second and fourth of the prior uh, quatrain, and that follows suit in the third. The first and third lines rhyme in the same way that the second and the fourth lines rhyme from the third to the second. So the second and third quatrains both bring something of the sound of the prior one into themselves, and that knits the 3 quatrains together sonically in a way that I find very pleasing, and in a way that the Shakespearean, as I say, and the Petrarchan do not. So I think it makes the movement to the new rhyme in the concluding couplet, again, as you have EE, so these 2 rhyme, and there hasn't been anything before. There's no similar. This rhyme doesn't occur before the concluding couplet. It makes that movement to the new rhyme in the concluding couplet more dramatic and emphatic, I think, in a way, again, that I find very pleasing. Um, the ending couplet of a sonnet often has a kind of summing up or driving the point home quality anyway, and in that sense, it stands apart from what came before it to an extent, even in the Shakespearean and Petrarchan sonnets. But I think it does so to a greater extent in the Spenserian sonnet. So the sonnet is course, an established form. And so we experience it as a coherent formal whole. And I think the overlapping rhyme of the Spenserian variety adds something more to our perception and experience of it as a coherent formal whole. And that therefore the balance and inner unity of the poem in this case, stands very movingly at odds with the substance of it, um, and, and, and deals with which deals with the emotional instability and mental agitation of the speaker, and the kind of crazy and unnatural ideas and formulations that he has recourse to, fire hardening ice, etc. Not only not melting it, but hardening it, just overthrowing um, any kind of coherent sense of how things are supposed to work in the world. So the formal um, features of the poem, the formal character of the poem, stands in a kind of tension with the tenor of it. And I think the effect is very powerful. So I think I have said enough about the poem, and I think I'll just read it again. And maybe some of these points can open a path to your own exploration of it. But first, when I put the poem in I'll make it visible here in the adjacent spaces, whatever in the comments maybe. I'm going to put it there without any updated spelling. It's going to have the spelling that, not necessarily the actual, letter, the orthography of the letters, but the spelling will be the same as it was. For example, love is spelled Loue in this, like Lyke. Ice is spelled Yse here, and fire. Now you could of course update the spelling, but I don't like to do that. I like to have the constant visual reminder of how far removed in time this is from me. And it just makes it more powerful and kind of more miraculous seeming to me that I can have this intense kind of connection with a person who lived long ago, who's been dead for 426 years. I just kind of like that, and you get used to it. It's really not that. I mean, device is spelled Deuyse. Um, there you have it. Anyway, so that's the poem, and I'll read it again. My love is like to ice, and I to fire. How comes it then that this, her cold so great, is not dissolved through my so hot desire, but harder grows the more I her intreat? Or how comes it that my exceeding heat is not delayed by her heart frozen cold, but that I burn much more in boiling sweat, and feel my flames augmented manifold? What more miraculous thing may be told, that fire, which all thing melts, should harden ice, and ice, which is congealed with senceless cold, should kindle fire by wonderfull device? Such is the power of love in gentle mind, that it can alter all the course of kynd. Okay, please consider subscribing. Bye.